Hi, this is Patsy with a Z. Welcome to Joy on Paper Live, a program for writers and those who dream of writing, and for everyone who wants to know the story behind the book. And oh wow, I've got such a story behind this book. Two stories, as a matter of fact. And my guest is George K. Mehok. And I'm so happy to welcome you to the program. George, I love you. I love you.
Thank you,
This,
Patsy. It's great
this,
to be here.
this book, I've got it all sort of I've done everything. I marked it all up. It is such a great book. It is just so good. It's oh
Thank you.
wow, it's
Thank
amazing.
you so
Going
much.
dark. It's called Going Dark. Woo. Now I will tell you that I know a great deal about this subject. There's so many reasons why I love this book and why I'm so excited about it. First of all, let's say it gives homage to Clancy because you write there's so much in this book, all the technical stuff, and you don't dumb it down, and you make it so readable. It's so much fun to read these details, and you do it so cleverly. It's just so I was thinking Clancy, but even I loved it even more than a Clancy because you also have there's so much there's this history that we're going to get into. I want to show you my book. This is one of my treasured books, and it is Scouting for Washington. This is a very old book,
Oh,
and it's been a treasure to me for years. And the subtitle, of course, it's so wonderful because it's exactly what we're talking about today. I don't know how many times I've read it. I love it. And the whole thing is, it is a book about exactly what you're talking about. So it's so funny. And it's called, the subtitle is A Story of the Days of Sumter and Tarleton. So that's what
ah,
it's about. And so I know a lot about the story. It's very exciting. You've made it very exciting. So I'm going to let you talk all about it, but I just want to show everybody something very, really interesting. First of all, the cover is great. And the cover is great for
thank
a
you.
very special reason because it has this gold coin on it. And I'll let you explain it. I can't believe this is a debut novel. It's just so impressive. Explain this cover.
Sure, sure. So the story is a dual timeline, as you said, Patsy. It it begins during the Revolutionary War period, 1781, and then fast forwards to the current day. And that coin that you see on the front is a King George III, 1773 gold guinea. And the coin links the two stories. The coin is passed from, and I don't want to give away too much, but passed from Thomas Jefferson to the hero during the Revolutionary War, Jack Jewett. And it's a coin that signifies the holder of the coin, the possessor of the coin, is a patriot and is trusted by the founding fathers, including George Washington, including Thomas Jefferson. And that coin then is passed down from generation to generation throughout what's called the Liberty Unit, a group of hereditary guardsmen that protect the President of the United States and just the interests of the United States throughout history. So the coin is really the link between the past and the present.
It's very appropriate. It's a great cover. And I was really happy to see this blurb from Steve Berry because Steve Berry has been on my program, both the radio program and the YouTube channel, many
Wow.
times. He's one of my favorite authors. One of the reasons I love his books is because he goes back in history and to all the
Hmm.
places and most of the locations where his books take place, I have been. I've either lived there or I've traveled there. So I relate to his books just as I do to this one. So, of course, Steve says that it's smart, detailed, and highly entertaining. The story resonates with spirit, blending fiction and reality and tragedy with triumph into a compelling thriller. And he says, check it out. And when Steve Berry tells somebody to check it out, because Steve Berry knows when a book is great. And I also have there that it starts with 9/11 is the beginning. And we're going to talk about that. But as I said, it's just so exciting that this is a debut novel. That so explain a little bit to people who you are because your own background is very impressive, and now you're going to be a
Thank you.
famous writer.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I began by being a technologist. My career has been involved in technology from software early on with large companies to becoming a chief information officer, which is basically responsible for all of technology for a company. So I've built data centers, I've designed data centers, I've written software, I've had teams of hundreds of people who have done the same and built amazing innovation related technologies. So that's my background. So when you read the book and when you read about Paul Knox, who is the NSA cyber forensics expert, it's coming from reality. It's coming from my experience and from my network's experience. People in my circle of friends who are just amazing technologists provided input to this book, validated a lot of the information that and a lot of the methods in which both Paul used to protect the internet from hackers and also our villain used to hack into our infrastructure. So my background starts with technology, but I'm also an amateur historian. I just love history. I've started with the Revolutionary War period. I've read the biography of every founding father. And then I took it forward to the presidents. I'm up to Teddy Roosevelt as reading every biography of the presidents up until that point in time, and I'm working my way forward. So the stories that come with these amazing individuals and what they dedicated and what they sacrificed are blended into the technology oriented thriller-esque story of going dark.
The great thing about it, I knew I was in for a treat when I got to, there was a, you mentioned Bash Array. And when you're, oh, as I said, I get so many thrillers. And the people don't actually know about technology. They pick it up out of Wikipedia or something.
That's right. That's right. Because it's been my career for the last 25 years. Writing software, designing data centers, designing networks. As I tried, and the challenge was ensuring that the technology oriented aspects of the book weren't too detailed enough where I lost people. And I was so glad to hear earlier that you said I left enough in. And I learned that from Tom Clancy. He would go into the military aspects of tanks and rockets and so forth. So I really tried to do my best to balance it so I didn't lose the reader.
I saw that you did. I recognized it right away. I almost get into your head. I was thinking, he's thinking, can I get away with this? Can I say this? Because you don't want to dumb it down. You want readers to learn something. And boy, oh boy, readers will learn a lot from this book. We sit at the internet and just float around in there, but people don't really know what's controlling it. So what I want to do now, as I said, there are so many reasons I love your book, and it is based a lot of my own research into the Revolutionary War period. I've done a lot of research myself, and this book, I don't know if when you were doing research, you actually ran into this book. It's very rare. This one is a collector's
I
book.
wish
So
I would have. I am not familiar with that.
that book is written by John Preston True. He wrote a lot of books set in that period. So you'll definitely want to check it out. I want you to let's set the stage. We'll go back in time because I hate to say this, but a lot of people don't know too much about American history. And you see sometimes those man in the street questions like who's the president, who's the vice president, when did World War who was in the Revolutionary War, who fought who. Answers you get from people sometimes just it blows my mind because I just love history so much. So let's go back to this period, the Revolutionary
Great.
War, from 1776 on to the time of this period that you're talking about, 1781,
Mhm,
and
mhm.
how exciting it was, and how young these people were. These our founders, they were so young, and they were so smart. So let's just go. Give us this history of this period.
Sure. Sure. As you said, the Revolutionary War started near 1776, and my book begins on, on June 6th, 1781. It's roughly 6 years into the Revolutionary War. And if you think about that period, June of 1781, the campaign for Yorktown, which basically ended the Revolutionary War, began in October of that same year. So the book begins with the story of Jack Jewett, and he's a legendary Virginian who, in June of 1781, was in a tavern, Cuckoo Tavern, and he overheard British soldiers talking about a campaign to travel from Richmond to Charlottesburg to capture the Virginia Assembly. In addition to the Virginia Assembly, the famous Thomas Jefferson. And Tarleton, who you mentioned, was leading that raid. And Jack Jewett heard about this and said, I have to do something. In June of 1781, in the middle of the night, he jumps on his horse and he rides 40 miles from Cuckoo Tavern to Charlottesville to Monticello, which is Thomas Jefferson's home. And he rides not on the main road, but he rides on the uncharted roads through thick brush and briar. And the prologue of my book imagines what it must have been like for Jack to ride through that deep, dense brush for 40 miles in the middle of the night. And his only goal was to warn Thomas Jefferson that the British were coming to capture him.
Now, of
So
course,
it was a pit.
he's
So
known
go ahead.
as a Paul Reviewer of the South,
That's
right?
right.
And he was so young and so brave and just really a man of action.
Absolutely. Yeah. A man of action and a man of uh, character, of determination. It's all he wanted to do was to warn Thomas Jefferson because he understood how the capture of the governor could change the tide of the war.
And that's true. Thomas Jefferson, there he was in Monticello. And so tell us what happened here when he gets to Monticello, because it was something that Jefferson had to deal with.
That's right. So, first of all, Jack, being 26, he was in awe of Monticello. He rides up to Monticello in the early dawn morning, and in front of him was this majestic estate. And he thinks to himself, what am I going to say to Thomas Jefferson, the man who penned the Declaration of Independence? And that was penned in 1776, 6 years before this ride. Thomas Jefferson was already a famous, revered person. And so in his mind, in the second chapter, he's thinking, what do I say? Oh, maybe I'll talk about the horses that I know Thomas Jefferson had just purchased from Paris. And then Jack says, what am I thinking? I have to warn him that the British are coming. He was that nervous. So when he gets to Monticello, Thomas Jefferson walks out of the stables and Jack says, Sir, we must leave. We must leave. The British are coming. And Thomas Jefferson just calmly says, No, my son, I do not believe they're coming. They would never trek this far. And Jack had to he had to urge Jefferson to pay attention and to go. And Jefferson didn't. Jefferson invited him into his home and hosted him in his library. And all this time, Jack was trying to urge him. And it was just, I think, a beautiful moment. because Jack had to, he went through walked through Monticello in awe of that, again, majestic estate.
We still walk in awe. I love that place. It
It's
isn't it
amazing.
fantastic? It's just now. Did they, because you were writing, and did they give you some behind the scenes things that the tourists can't get?
I spent a lot of time in his den or his library where he actually wrote, which had windows that overlooked the gardens. And so I focused on that area and also the foyer, the entranceway, where he displayed many of his collection of different Native American art and other things like that. And also his clock, his famous clock was in that foyer. But that's where Jack meets Jefferson, and it really starts there. And if you move, and he walks through the home, and just again looks around and can't believe the number of books. It's like your library behind you. There are books everywhere. They line the wall. There are papers on the floor, and Thomas Jefferson's desk. Jack asks him, "Is that the desk? Is that the desk you wrote the Declaration of Independence?" And Thomas Jefferson says something to the effect, "I started writing it here, but where I really wrote most of it in Philadelphia with my friend Benjamin Franklin." And so it takes the story of the Declaration of Independence, which was written 6 years before this ride, into the story. And so you get to know Thomas Jefferson. And then I don't want to go too
No,
far, but they then, sorry,
yeah, no, I
I
know.
can't stop talking
It's
about it.
hard to say what we want to give away, because really that scene is so wonderful. There we have this young man who has to convince this famous legend, and convince him to get moving. Put down the Madeira and let's move.
That's right. That's right. And that's an actual true story that the there are witnesses that recounted that Thomas Jefferson offered Madeira to Jack when he came to the house. I
I
include you're right,
I
right.
mean, Jefferson would do that. He knew his Madeira.
That's right. That's right.
Well, I love that scene. I love all the scenes, and
Thank you so much.
again, I don't know where people, when you're reading this book, this is the wonderful way to learn history. When you have somebody who's done the kind of research that George has done here, really in depth research, where you start living the places and feeling the places where you are writing about. And that's what you capture so much in this scene, and then and the other scenes. So this is, we'll maybe come back to this part. Let's now jump into the technology part, because you this is also a big part for you. This is your life, and I just love all the details that you give about, maybe we have to, here we have the internet. Everybody knows we have the internet. Nobody knows how it's, what's all the things behind it. But we do have some spies, and we do have some bad guys who are very interested in the internet and very interested in taking it down and doing bad things. So tell us now, we have, of course, our main character, and this is fun. But then we also need a bad guy. And boy, oh boy, do you create a bad guy. In the tradition of Clancy, you come out with a really great bad guy who knows the internet.
That's right. Hasan is a master hacker. Hasan is has was raised in Syria. He was groomed by Iranian Guard operatives at a very young age. He was trained to be a master computer espionage agent, and he finds a way to build a super hacker unit in the United States, which has, it turns out, was part of Osama bin Laden's second phase to his 9/11 plan.
And you explain very well in here the vulnerability. Now, we all hear about hackers, they're hacking into this one, they're hacking into that one. But there are bad people out there who want to cause real harm to us and to other countries. And the internet now controls our lives. People go crazy if their phones go down for 2 hours. What's wrong? Why don't you respond? Why don't you respond? Explain about this whole internet, how people can get into it and crawl around in it.
Sure, sure. Let's start with how vulnerable we are. As you mentioned, we are utterly dependent on everything connected to the internet, whether it be our cell phones, whether it be the computers, the laptops that we're talking on at this moment. Even if you think about how you buy things in the store, you're using your credit card. That credit card machine is linked to the internet. Without the internet, that credit card machine doesn't work. When you fly, the ticketing systems are all connected to the internet. All electric cars now are connected to the internet. Virtually everything is connected to the internet. So it becomes a serious vulnerability. So if we know that we're utterly dependent on it. Our adversaries do too. And they've, for years, for decades, they've been exploiting the internet and hacking and corrupting and stealing and holding people hostage, their data hostage, their personal information hostage, and doing what they call ransomware exploits, which basically means holding your information under lock and key, and they'll only give it back to you if you pay a ransom. So Hasan in the book, he creates this amazing hacker unit that is raking in millions of dollars every month from people who fall victim to his hacking unit. And this is how he and Khalid, who is his commander, fund this operation through this ransomware operation.
Of course, we just, I think recently, a hospital in Boston area, they were part of this. They were blackmailed
Mhm.
with this ransomware. And it was a major hospital.
The hospitals are being targeted, local governments are being targeted. And the bad guys know that they'll pay because the information that is stored in the hospital, the patient information is very, very personal. And the hospitals can't afford to lose that information. So the hospitals pay. They have no other choice. And it's just like anything else. If the bad guys know that they can make money, they're going to go after it. And they just every year get stronger and stronger, better and better. So we just have to continue to fortify our security. And that was one of the inspirations behind the book. I really hoped that people in leadership, in government, in the private sector would read and understand how vulnerable we are because fiction, in many cases, foretells the future. So hopefully, this is just a fictional story and doesn't turn into reality. In other words, the internet and power going down for weeks on end, because that would just disrupt
Well,
society as we know it.
and it's not just the internet. We're talking about they can control power plants, they can control the water sources, they can control dams, they can control everything if they break in.
But they can control, they can damage, they can manipulate, and they can steal. And that's what they do. There was just last week a exploit or a hack into Amazon, and the hacker stole 2.8 million employee records. So this is the employee records of 2.8 million people. That included their contact information, their email, their work address. And then they posted this information on what's called the dark web. That's the web behind the internet that only the bad guys or anyone that's where all the illicit information is stored and sold on the internet. So it, it's happening every week.
That's what was so interesting. You hear about the dark web, you and in the book, this is where you go, and it's explain it. It's it's hard for me to say how what it is. How do you get into it? That's what your
Sure.
job is, right?
It is. It's understanding it, absolutely. And that was Paul's job. So Paul Knox, the main character, he spent years investigating cyber criminals on the dark web for the NSA. And the dark web, the easiest way to explain it is if you go to Google or to your web browser and enter a web address like www.google.com, it takes you to Google. And if you then go to Google and you search for something, let's say you're going to search for a Tom Clancy book, you enter Tom Clancy book, and Google brings up a list of links, one being probably Amazon, another being Barnes and Noble, and so forth. The dark web is it includes websites that cannot be accessed by Google. It cannot be accessed by a standard web browser like Internet Explorer. You have to have special tools and you have to know the exact URL or the exact website address. And these website addresses are very cryptic. You don't know, you can't remember them. They're so long and they're just random words. And it's used by people who are selling either illicit material, weapons, drug things that where they don't want to be found. That things that cannot be sold or exchanged on the standard internet. So it's the internet behind the internet.
It's it's really difficult in a way to understand, but I'm glad that you do. I'm glad that you're working on it. Now, of course, a lot of the book is centered at MIT. So tell us about what
Yes,
research you did there and to make it so realistic and that we feel like we're in MIT for a while there.
sure. So first of all, I love Boston. Boston is an incredible city. It's also has deep roots in the Revolutionary War. It's where the first battles were fought. And MIT is one of the leading technology universities in the country. And my fictional story has Paul Knox, the main character. He was a young student there and became a an apprentice to Professor Clark. And Professor Clark is one of the original inventors of the internet back in the 80s. And Paul learned from Professor Clark. And then Paul graduated from MIT. And at that time, soon as he graduated, 9/11 happened in 2001. 9/11 happened, and Paul, my main character, then enlisted in the Air Force and became one of the very early comms officer that built up our cyber warfare capabilities. So MIT was where Paul learned his trade. But then it takes it a step further because Paul's daughter, 16 years later, it becomes a prodigy, a mathematics prodigy in high school. She then chooses MIT. She follows her father to MIT and becomes a brilliant computer scientist. And again, works with Professor Clark in his later days to build and design the next generation internet. And that next generation internet is what Hasan, our bad guy, wants access to, and because it's going to hold the key to the ransom and hold the key to leveraging and bringing down the United States. Emma is who is Paul's daughter becomes entrapped, chased, but then also has to use her skills, her technology skills, but also just her smarts to figure out how to prevent Hassan from completing his task.
She's a great character. And then there's another female character, and I like
Mm,
her very much. So tell us what I also I mentioned that I love that you don't dumb things down. So here you actually talk about the guns and you explain
mm.
what Colt 1911 competition is. You talk about, of course, the XDM Elite, and that's from Springfield, and it's a 10 millimeter. I slept with a Uzi under my bed for. I love when authors put in guns that are appropriate for the occasion. So I don't know if you're a gun expert or you just work with somebody, but I had a cozy mystery author who she had her character, a little old lady, pull out a 45. And I had to explain to her, that's 3 pounds. And your little cozy mystery character is like a 95-pound weakling. She's not Clint Eastwood. But these two guns and the other guns that you mentioned and all of those things that I enjoyed reading about. Again, like Clancy, you didn't dumb it down. Are you the gun expert or did you work with somebody else?
It was a combination of multiple things. So, one of the authors that has inspired me was introduced to me by my father, who was an Air Force veteran. And that author is Stephen Hunter. Stephen Hunter wrote a series about a character that he invented called Bob the Nailer. And Bob was the most decorated sniper in the Vietnam War. Stephen Hunter went into great detail about the sniper rifle, about the weapons. But again, he kept it at a point where you learned about them, you appreciated them, but you didn't get lost in them. So I really tried to use that same technique. And that so the research that I did was I tried to understand the weapons. I am not a gun owner or gun expert, but I did go through uh, concealed carry training. I fired the guns at at the range, but most importantly, I spoke to police officers who carried the Glock, who carried the Springfield, and carried the different weapons, so that I understood the details. And they found errors in my early drafts. So I really tried to ensure that it was authentic as possible. And I tried to associate the weapon appropriately with the owner. So the Colt 911 was for Paul. He was an Air Force marksman. He carried the competition version because it's so well balanced. But more importantly, he carried the 911, which many people don't carry. They carry a Glock or something that is more ergonomical. He carried it because his father carried it, and his father's father carried it. And so his father gave him an early Colt when he was, I'm sorry, 911 went early on. And so he then carried that forward. And then Leah, who is one of the Liberty Unit guardsmen, she carries the Springfield, which I just thought was more appropriate for her. And then what an amazing story, Springfield is where the armory was that Henry Knox founded during the Revolutionary War. So it was all tied together around that Springfield armory.
That's what I like, that you tied everything together. Everything flows. There's these little strings that go through the entire book that connects everything and weaves a nice story. So let's talk about the idea for the entire series, because it's called a Liberty Unit novel, which I know it's the first of many because you're going to have a lot of liberty. I know this. I don't know. Are you already finished the second book already?
I'm about two-thirds through.
I knew, with all your history, with all that you know about history. So the idea for the Liberty Unit is great. And we don't want to give any secrets away because there are some real surprises as we find out more about Paul Knox and about his background and his family's background, how they go back all the way to the Revolutionary War. But tell us your plans for the Liberty Unit.
All right. So the Liberty Unit again started in 1781 by Henry Knox, and Jack Jewett, our main character in the Revolutionary War period, is the first member, and Henry Knox is the founder. And that is a hereditary unit or hereditary group that it follows through history again, generation after generation. And then you fast forward to Paul Knox and his father, and they, and I don't, again, I don't want to give too much away, but they are Liberty Unit members. And but Paul doesn't know during the story. He
Yeah.
finds out about
We don't want
halfway
to say
through.
what we don't want to say what he finds out. We don't want to say what he finds out. He finds out a lot of things. There are some nice surprises in here, and that's always exciting about a thriller and a mystery, and that we're going to have some surprises. And it's very clever how you weave it all together. And I think we're gonna see this Liberty unit throughout history. So there's lots of things that they're going to be doing, and I'm sure we'll add characters, and we're gonna have a whole full-fledged major series here, which will someday, as I know, it's going to turn into a streaming video series.
Mm,
I know that because I've already seen it. When This is the wonderful thing for me, I see things. If I see a book as a film, when I'm reading it, if I by page 10
mhm.
I start seeing it as a film, then I know that it's going to be a great book, and then I know it's I'm going to hold on for the the nowadays. Of course, it's going to be a streaming. It's going to happen because you've got great characters between Paul and Emma and Leah. We won't perhaps have the same bad guy. We'll have new bad
What did
guys.
you think of Mac? Mac was one of my
Oh,
favorite characters. Mac is I think I enjoyed Mac's story and
oh,
watching it unfold.
absolutely. I did a little video for you. So just watch this, okay? And then we'll talk some
Okay,
more.
sure, sure.
Okay.
That was amazing.
I see it in my head, and I'm sure it's going to be a series one day. We'll have it for sure. You'll need a few more books, but at some point they'll option it, and you'll know that we're gonna see it. Now they don't have red carpet so much for streaming videos, but they have a big party in Hollywood. So you have to promise to invite me because I'm the one who's predicting when.
Absolutely.
Uh, and I did this video just so I can keep. I want people to read it. There's so many reasons why people should read this book because it is very scary in a way. It is wow.
And
We don't learn
it's
sometimes from
scary.
history.
Patsy, you're right. It's scary, but the way it evolves, it turns out to be, hopefully you felt this. It was more a story about a father and a daughter and how that relationship evolves over time. So when people are looking for a book that is a thriller, it has technology, it has action. This is also the, a story about two characters that are challenged, their relationships challenged, the father and daughter early on, and then over time that relationship comes together throughout the challenges that they have.
That's what makes it so great. It is. You need that emotional connection with readers, and plus, not just them, but the other characters that I know you're going to be adding. And Mac, for example, is a character that is great. And you just have this way of writing. Actually, I found those scenes between father and daughter, I found delightful. The scenes where she's questioning what the heck is going on, I found that so wonderful. It was all of it
Mhm.
just blended together so beautifully. You want people to learn something, but you're not preaching to them. It's just part of the background of the entire human story. That you have to have this human connection to characters, and you accomplish that. That's why I'm casting in my head who I want to play. I'm already thinking about who I want to play Paul Knox because I can see him, and the same with
We're gonna
Emma.
have to talk about that offline. I'd love to. I'd love
Yeah.
to hear who you think it should be.
Yeah, and of course, you're working on book 2, and it'll come out
Mhm.
probably sometime next year, and then you'll be back
Yes.
here. But meanwhile, we're going to keep promoting this so that we get, I hope, I just, I don't know, you should do a big book signing in Washington, D.C. There's some really nice places to do book signings. Do a really flashy one. Sometimes you have to think out of the box. You really need to you need to
Sounds great.
promote this. If I were you, I would take a major location in Washington, get your publicity people, get everybody together and do a major book signing and giveaway and have some cardboard cutouts of the characters, human size. Really, because
Mhm.
one of the things I would love Jack Jewett to become well known as a real American hero because he has not received the respect and the
You're so
honor
right.
that he deserves.
I haven't, you're so right. I haven't thought about it like that. 'Cause I did not know about him until I came across his story just by happenstance. But you're right. People don't know who he is. They should know who he is. So maybe we'll make that happen.
Exactly. They should know who he is. I knew who he was. I've known about him for a long time because I love that period of time. And he has never received that kind of acclaim that he
Mm-mm.
should. Everybody knows Paul Revere, but nobody knows about him. And can you imagine how history would be changed if they had gotten Jefferson?
Oh,
Tell,
yeah.
tell us a
Oh, yeah.
little bit about this Tarleton and what he had planned, because he was an interesting character as a British lieutenant colonel.
Oh, he was brutal. So the more I researched about him and his unit, they used the most deadly techniques to try to terrorize the loyalists or what they thought were traitors. They learned from the Seminole Indians. They would, for example, they would cut the heads off of people and put them on stakes. So this, it was very surprising to me because you romanticize about the British redcoats and the Revolutionary period, but they terrorized the people of Virginia in the South and South Carolina, North Carolina, and so forth. They would kill their livestock, all in to try to obviously take control over the hearts and minds of their people.
Exactly.
Tarleton,
They were really bad guys. And Tarleton, again, he has not received the attention as a bad guy that he should. He was a bad guy.
that's right.
And one of the things about him, I don't know if you, with your all of your research, that you realize that he was very wealthy. He inherited
Mhm.
a lot of money, £5,000 in those days. But he was a big gambler and a big drinker, and he actually lost that money in a tavern called the Cocoa Tavern
Mm,
in London.
mm,
So
mm.
there's a lot of things that about him, and he did terrible things. They really this destroying crops, destroying the animals when they pass by a farm, all of these things, and worse. They did worse things, and they really were awful. And we don't talk about this enough. The British Army, when they came over, first of all, they were so arrogant and they were so sure that they were going to destroy these backwoods people, these stupid people. And oh, they were just so awful. And we were so lucky that we had these brilliant people, the founders, who were all so wonderful. And when during 1776, they were so young. So many of them were
Mm.
just out of university, out of Harvard and Yale, and they'd gone to Harvard and Yale when they were 14, 15, 16. They spoke Greek and Latin, and they read all of the great masters. They were so smart. But the British came over like a bunch of dumb hicks, and we're going to destroy them. And Tarleton was one of the worst.
He was, and I try to put that essence of his ruthlessness into the book and carry it all the way through because he went back to London and received a hero's welcome, which was even though they lost the war. And so it's amazing.
One of my favorite hotels in Washington, I love the Willis, but the Hay Adams Hotel opposite the White House
Hmm.
is a fantastic hotel. They have a lovely lobby. I don't know who the manager is now. I used to know the manager. But you should do a book signing there. And I want you to do a big life size cutout of Jack Jewett. And he's a big guy. He's a big guy. And I could see you
He was.
standing there next to him, next to the cutout, and really telling this story. So you can have Jack on one side and you can have Jefferson on the other. And you can really, you have to nowadays, to promote a book, you have to think out of the box. It's not enough just to
Mm.
get all that stuff, Facebook and all of that stuff. It's nonsense nowadays for promoting books. You need to think out of the box. And with a book like this, because it has so much potential, it's going to be a series. I know it's going to be a big series. So just hit it out of the ballpark right from the beginning. Go to the Hay Adams Hotel. I'm sure they have a wonderful, great manager. Usually they seem to be, most of the great hotel managers are still Swiss, but you'll find
Mm.
one and just take over that lobby. And that way you'll get all of the people who are around Congress. And those are the people who need to read this book. They are the
Those are the
ones.
people that I want to read the book.
Exactly.
That's
So
right.
how are you
The
going to do it?
people.
How are you going to get to these people? I'm telling you right now, cutouts, big life-size cutouts of both of them, you standing in the middle with a big pile of books, signing them. That way you'll get some senators, some representatives, but also a lot of the people who work underneath them, all of the under people.
Mm.
And those are the people who, if they get excited about something or interested in something, like in the dark web and knowing the threats that are
Hmm.
out there. In the old days, when you think about it, Jefferson's, oh, John
Hmm.
Adams, oh my gosh. They read books. They all read all the time.
Oh,
And nowadays, politicians just spend all their time on the telephone raising money for their next campaign. I don't know how
hmm
many read books, but they do tend to have a few smart people on their staff who actually read books. Those are the people
Sure.
you have to get to. And the only way you can get to them is to make a splash. I'm telling you this right now. Go to the Hay Adams
I'm
Hotel.
listening. I'm
I
listening.
love that place. I love that place. Oh, the food there is so
You're
good.
going to
Oh
have to
my.
go with me, though.
Huh? I'll
You're going to
come.
have to go
I'll come
too.
stand there. I'll come stand there hugging Jack Jewett because I think he deserves to be known. He's a hero. When you're 20 years old and you make the decision to take off, you don't wait for somebody to say, "Oh, should you go? Should you not?" He said, "I'm going 40 miles through the some of the worst areas to run go through with a horse." But he did it. And then to meet Jefferson and to convince Jefferson, that
Mhm.
is, he's a hero and he deserves to be have that respect, and you can make that happen. That's the job sometimes of an author, to bring something to light that other people don't know about, and you have captured a guy that really you can run with.
That's so nice of you. No, you're inspiring me.
I hope so, because
You
otherwise,
are.
if you don't, what's going to happen, you're going to do some interviews with other people who don't have, I understand the history. You'll do a lot of interviews with people who will read the
Hmm.
book and everybody will love the book. uh, but
Hmm.
I know that period, I know those characters, and I know because I love history, and I know that you have something here that's really special. But if you just let it just, I'm going to do a few interviews here, a few interviews there, do some Facebook, do some stuff, it's not going to get you anywhere.
Patsy, here was an idea. See if you like this one. I was going to start in Richmond and work my way to Charlottesville, then to Trenton, then to Philadelphia, then up to DC, to Boston, New York, and then finish in West Point, and then take one more trip back down to Mount Vernon, back down to Arlington, and do stops along the way. I was going to relive my fictional journey of Jack Jewett from
Follow
Richmond
his,
all the way
follow in
through.
his footsteps, exactly, follow in his footsteps. But and then that's wonderful, and that's a wonderful way to get publicity, particularly written publicity, to get newspaper
Hmm.
articles in the local towns. You have to make sure
Hmm.
that you hit all of the newspapers in those towns and make sure that people
Hmm.
come out. Has to be well organized, but the ones you really want, the ones who need to read this book, they have to
It's
understand the
DC.
danger that. And sometimes, how can I say, we people will hear, oh, the Russians are doing some hacking and some Iran's doing some hacking, but they don't really understand that these people have many of these people have trained here in the United States. They've gone to
They're
MIT.
here.
They're
They're
here.
here.
They're here, and they
They're
graduated from
absolutely here.
MIT, and they're
And
smart,
they're
waiting.
waiting for the right time. They're
So
waiting for the right time because our power grid is vulnerable. Our telecommunication system, which the internet rides on, is vulnerable. There are a lot of people that are working very hard to secure it, but it's such a complex network of systems and
Yeah, exactly,
you
exactly.
know,
People don't understand it.
it's just we're just vulnerable. Yeah.
So in all of those towns you go to, Charlottesville and Raleigh and all of those, you'll find book lovers who will love the book and they'll buy the book. But the ones you need are those ones that are floating around Washington, D.C. and the Capitol. That's where you have to go first. And then reach out. But go and have cutouts, make a splash, get yourself in the newspaper there, give away red, white, and blue balloons, do all sorts of crazy things. But be in the Hay
Mm.
Adams, because Hay Adams is exactly the perfect location for a book like this. And you have to get through to people in Congress. You have to, because that's the only ones, they are the decision makers, and they have to get behind protecting us because we are
Mm.
too vulnerable.
I
So,
agree.
so much for my,
100%.
my preaching to you. But
You're not preaching it. It's
it's
lovely.
just, I get excited about a book like this. It has so much potential, and you are so good. You just, it's just amazing what you've created here. A wonderful story. It's just, it reads so well. It's so much fun to read, and great characters. The start of a really great series. Everybody, sometimes when you see now a streaming series that really hits it, like the new Reacher series, where people really get involved in it, when
Hmm.
they meet Paul Knox and Emma and all the rest, they're going to love this book. It's called Going Dark, and we don't want to go dark. People, we don't want to go dark. Let people go into the dark web and protect us somehow, but we don't actually want to go dark. George, just thank you so much for being on Joy and Paper. Is this your website?
That is my website, www.georgemehok.com. First name, last name.com.
Yeah, because I know I have George K. Mehok, which you is nice to use, but
Yep.
on the website you
Yep.
just George Mehok, and it's wonderful,
That's right.
George.
Just George.
So thank
Thank
you
you.
so much
Thank
for
you.
joining me. It's a joy to talk to you. I'm really excited about this, and of course you'll be back for this. Oh no, I hope. Here's the deal, George. I hope that you're back before the second book is released, because if you get some breaking news that somebody's optioned it, so if you get an
Mm.
option on this book, you have to promise to come and
You'll be the
announce it
first
here.
to know.
That's it, because I don't get a
No,
lot of
you'll be the
breaking
first
news,
to know.
but I want you back here
You
because.
will be the first to know.
Okay, thank you, George. Thank you very much. Bye bye now. Okay,
All right.
everybody, get this
Thank
book.
you so much.
Okay, bye bye. Bye. Well, it was so much fun to talk to George Mehok about his wonderful book, Going Dark. And we don't want to go dark. We want to go straight over to Amazon, Barnes and Noble, or a local bookstore that's carrying this wonderful book and get it and start reading. It is fantastic. A wonderful, wonderful thriller. Oh, just everything about it is wonderful. And please get it. And meanwhile, subscribe to Joy on Paper Live so that I can bring you more interesting interviews and fascinating interviews with wonderful authors like George Mehok. Thank you. Bye bye now.